Today's guest is Eliza VanCort, author of the best-selling book, A Woman's Guide to Claiming Space, Stand Tall, Raise Your Voice, Be Heard. Let's have a conversation today on The Open Highway.
Hey, I'm Kara, host of the Conquest of Bliss podcast, a show designed to help people explore well-being in a casual setting. The thing is that I spent a super long time searching for well-being, and once I finally started to gather some of the tools and understanding, I started wondering why it was so hard to access in the first place. So, the Conquest of Bliss was born. And even though it still feels extremely vulnerable, every week I release a new conversation about important topics that make up our well-being. Amazingly, I get to spend my time talking to experts like neuroscientists and psychologists, and lay people like plumbers, authors, and yoga instructors, all helping me working together to create a diverse, expansive library of conversations around what happiness and well-being are, what tools we can use to get there, and what it looks like sometimes when it plays out in the real world. If you want to join me on my journey, The Conquest of Bliss is available anywhere podcasts are found.
Hey everybody, Eric here. I just wanted to take a moment and thank you for your continuing support for The Open Highway. And I have news for you. The Open Highway is now on Substack. That's right, head on over to Substack where we take a deeper dive into the news of the day, the topics that you hear on the show, or pretty much whatever I'm interested in. The link is in the show notes, so head on over and sign up, and now you can be part of the conversation. But most of all, thanks for listening.
The Open Highway with Eric Erickson.
I like being on the news and it's lovely, but I don't necessarily, that 7-second answer is not always the most easy thing to flesh out your idea. So
it's tough, isn't it? I mean, there's sound bites. We become this world of sound bites versus
Yes.
Conversations.
100%. We really have. It's a problem, but
How
also,
do you fight that then? Like, you obviously do the conversational podcast, but how are you able to get your background out there without truncating it down to 7 seconds?
Yeah. Well, I think you just do truncate it down to 7 seconds. And if it's a good interviewer, they will ask a follow-up and then you can talk a little longer. So usually my segments, they say they're going to be, a 3-minute segment and then they go on for a little bit longer. I'm really lucky that way. So I get to say a little bit more than just, I wrote a book.
It always comes up. I'm going to start a mosaic of just my guests holding their book, and I'm going to put that up.
I'm just going to sit here like this, so yeah.
When did that come out?
May 11th.
Okay. And how's it been doing?
Well, it hit number 1 in new releases when it came out, which was pretty cool. And I just had a big TikTok bump. I'm on TikTok. My kids are like, Mom, you're kind of old for TikTok. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm old for TikTok. That's just what's happening. but I got a big bump on TikTok. In fact, just over the last week, I've gotten 50,000 more followers on TikTok.
Wow. Congratulations.
So yeah, it's been a crazy week. So what ended up, I ended up getting a lot of followers, which was awesome. And so now my book has gone way up again. I mean, it's kind of been going up and down, but now it's way up again.
Yeah. And people are resonating to the theme, right? So here's your 7 seconds. What's the book about in 7 seconds?
Well, Eric, my book is an intersectional guidebook for women, which covers everything from posture to imposter syndrome to issues of race. And the idea is it's about, on a global level, helping women claim space. And to claim space is to live the life of your choosing unapologetically and bravely. And I have kind of a different definition of bravery than most people.
Well, the term claim space is interesting to me. So let's talk about that a little bit. What does that mean? Because I think to some people get scared by that term, or they get scared by that idea because they feel like it's a sum total game. It's like if somebody claims their space, that takes it away from me, and
Right.
there isn't enough to go around. But even as I grow older, I know that's not true.
Right.
What happens? What are you getting from that?
Well, I mean, you know, you can always say the politic answer, which is that's not true. But the truth is, it is partly true. I mean, I worked with a client who was pitching to VCs, and we went to the Gracie building, and we walked down, and on the first floor, it was all people of color routing us to the elevators. We got on the elevators, we got upstairs. There was a white woman waiting for us, very attractive white woman. She had white privilege, she had pretty privilege, she was the greeter. She then walked us down to the person we were pitching, and almost to a person, every single person was a white man in that room. Truly, it was stunning to me, and younger. A lot of them are younger. There's one older person in the room, and a lot of younger people. And I mean, I'm older, so take that with a grain of salt. But and you know, if you're competing in a pool where you're more likely to get into that pool because of who you are and what you look like, then if the pool then says, you know, we're letting other people in, then someone who might be at the bottom of the qualification to be in that pool might have to leave for someone else to get in there in general. But I think that in general, that is a short-term way of looking at it. The long-term way of looking at it is that when more people are involved in the marketplace of ideas and more people have equitable power, everybody wins in the long run. I mean, it's
there's
even
shelf life
with what?
Well, so let's use your example of the pool. So let's use COVID as an example, because over COVID, a lot of people had to pivot, and there's been a lot of changes in the world over COVID. So if somebody is aging out of a certain job, or if they suddenly, because we have to admit, across the board, youth wins because new ideas, new energy. So if somebody gets to a point and they suddenly look around and they're like, okay, I'm not marketable anymore, whether it's due to my age, due to my socioeconomic status, what I bring to the table, whatever it is.
Sure.
So in the long term for society, it's definitely better because we have equality, we have everybody's at the table, everybody has a chance. But there is a definite short-term shock across the board to people who are suddenly looking up. It's been done before with technology. Suddenly people are teched out of the business because their jobs aren't needed anymore. There is a short-term shock.
Absolutely. I mean, and my feeling is that sometimes that just has to be. And that's okay. And the example I would give is that I have cartoons in my book because I am a superhero nerd. And so and I wanted to illustrate things with cartoons. And so when I was at the gym, I showed my girlfriend a chapter on mansplaining, and she said, oh my God, this should be in every restaurant, in every gym. And I thought, oh my God, what if I did first aid for mansplaining, kind of like first aid for choking? That would be hilarious. But then I thought, I'm going to turn the genre on my head, talk to experts about who mansplains who is the ally, and not do like that one blonde guy and that one white woman, but like really make it representative, which I did. Then we decided for some of the teasers for the book, we would actually have a cartoon of it, like kind of a very, stop motion cartoon. And I wanted to do the voices because my background is in political science, but it's also in the arts. I've been an actor for years, and then I was an acting teacher. I owned my own acting studio for 20 years. And so I can do the voices. I'm really good at it. And someone said, you can't do the voices because it's like 60% people of color and people are going to jump down your throat. And my first very white reaction was, well, that's bullshit. Sorry, can I say bullshit here?
Fuck yeah.
Okay, good. All right. I'm Italian. We swear like truckers. So half Italian, but yeah. So I was like, that's bullshit. Like, it's my story. It's my words. And then I thought, no, how many years have people of color had to sit around while their stories are told by white people, whether it's the white person is the person who wrote the story, or they're just invisible, or we're telling their stories in weird ways. or, any part can be played by a white person, but a Black person can only play this very certain thing. And now suddenly, once in a while, we're like, yeah, no, if you're going to voice a Black voice, you should have a Black artist. Like,
Right.
And I thought about it a lot, and then I talked to my forward writer, Alma Derricks, who's a Black woman, and she said, you know what? We have been dealing with this for years. And now you're going to get the chance to know what it feels like when the part's not for you. And I thought, okay, that's fair. I had my little white tantrum, but it was fair, So I think that sometimes you just have to go, well, this sucks for me because I used to get all of the things. And now I only get half of the things. And it's really fun when you're alive, you get to just walk around and get all of the things,
Yeah.
but you shouldn't necessarily get all the things.
It's an interesting discussion, because I think I like your term white tantrum, because there is a moment, because I work in the entertainment industry as well, and about the last 5 years, the shift has been incredible, and to the point where many people that I know, myself included, had to get out of it because there was no work anymore. But you can sit there and I love the cup. You can sit there. That's awesome.
That's me and my nieces. It's actually from the book. I Make Crazy Feminist Bitch Action Heroes. So anyway.
I'm just saying, you can sit there and say, woe is me, and become a crotchety old white person, for lack of a better term. Or you can say, okay, you know what, this is for the better good. I'm going to improve through this, and hopefully, we'll all come out of this better people on the other side.
Yeah.
It's not easy though. There is a moment of, dang it, I've worked and this is not fair. I've worked really hard, but that's taking away from other people that they've worked just as hard as well.
Yeah. I think that I used to call that white fragility attacks, but they're hard for me. But I just had something happen on TikTok that was actually part of why I exploded on TikTok. And, my whole life has been devoted to intersectionality. I mean, my daughter did anti-racist work to the point in high school where we made the national news and we got international death threats from white supremacists. We have bulletproof glass up in our house. We've been walking the walk for a while, and I got accused fairly of not thinking of women of color when I did this post that I thought was completely I didn't even consider, which is of course what we do. We don't even see the other, right? We just see whiteness as the norm. I didn't even consider that I was doing something insensitive. And then this Harvard professor did a stitch of it, and he was like, this is not cool. And then I did a response to it where I said, I vetted everything in my book past women of color. Most of my experts are women of color. This part didn't make it in the book. It wasn't vetted. And I wish it had been, because I would have caught it, that actually what I said was specific to white women and didn't include women of color. And thank you for checking me. Please follow this creator. He's great. And the response from women of color was just like, thank you so much. Nobody ever does this.
Is there a conversation there? Because I think sometimes things happen, and usually they come from a place of, and I'm putting this in quotes, as ignorance, white ignorance. It's like you say something not because it's even latent racism or it's not subconscious racism. It's just something you said for 50 years or a term or something, and no one's ever said anything to you. You never knew. And then somebody comes out and says, well, you can't say this. And it's one thing to just be like, can't say that, end of conversation. And you're kind of like, whoa, wait, I don't understand. You're like a child that's just been told not to do something, but you don't understand why. So you're not going to change your behavior because you don't understand what it was that you did. You're just told that's bad. So if somebody actually sits down and has a conversation and says, hey, can we chat about this for a minute so you understand where it's coming from, it's going to change your approach. Have you run into that?
I get that, but I guess the way I look at it is the level of barrage of racism that people of color get all day long. I mean, I went through a journey on race, and I don't believe you're ever done. I don't believe in being woke. I call it woking. But, I do have a lot of girlfriends that are women of color, and they've gotten to the point where we trust each other enough, or they'll tell me dumb white people stories. And
Mm.
the extent to which they are dealing with stuff that I can't, it stuns me. It really
Mm-hmm.
stuns me. And I feel like the exhaustion that it must be like to have to explain every damn thing. And the only analogy that I can really think of is like if a guy walked up to me and grabbed my ass and just, just rubbed up against it for a second. And I said, while they were passing, just touched a little too much. And I said, I really don't want you to do that. And they were like, why? I would just want them to be like, okay, my bad. Not going to rub up against your ass again. If I
Right.
decided to explain it, then I have the energy to explain it. But if a guy calls me honey, and he's not my boyfriend, like you call me honey, that's what my boyfriend does. I don't want to have to be like, well, let me explain to you how it's like the history of these words. I just want him to go like, cool, I won't do it. And so I
Okay.
think that's sort of, that's the analogy that I sort of use, is that it's just so constant that it's really not, it's for us to make the situation just say, okay, I get it, thank you.
Okay.
Rather than trying to, because it feels on the other end like we are asking them to prove it to us.
Right. That's one of the best explanations I think I've ever heard. Because
good.
it really does, because that analogy, that makes sense. I still maintain that there's points where people just go, I'm offended. And I think sometimes there's that conversation where we still need to have a conversation, because it's like, okay, you're getting offended by, here's a quick example. I have a friend who was working on a job recently and he called his supervisor boss.
Mm-hmm.
And someone got offended because they said that's racist. And he's like, why is it racist? And he goes, because Jack Benny's manservant, or what I believe they used to use the term, Rochester used to call him boss in the 40s. He goes, thereby that term is always now racist.
Okay.
And I'm like, and we're all talking about it. We're like, that seems like a very personal thing. That's not like he's calling him another term or something else. That's one person who must have a personal connection or something going on. And now they're trying to change an entire company because of something personal offense. That still seems like a time it's like we need to have a conversation, because that's a personal thing that you need to work through. That's not like, we're not talking about a societal wide terminology that we need to get rid of.
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I guess my feeling is everything is personal. Everything's fucking personal. And it's really not like, the best, and I know we all have a lot of problems with Louis C.K. right now, understandable, whatever, but he has a great thing that he says. He says, when someone calls you an asshole and you go, no, I'm not, he goes, that's not for you to decide. That's for the rest of us to decide. And I just feel like if somebody thinks that's not cool with them, it literally just isn't. And how hard is it for me to just accommodate that? Why is it so hard for me? And actually, I actually have a really good story about this. So we were hanging out at my house, a lot of women of color sitting around the table, and a couple of white women, I think 2 white men. And this was kind of several years ago when a lot of the terms were changing. And, this one guy who's a really cool guy, I was actually dating him at the time. He was really awesome. We're still friends. And he said, and he's very logical, and he said, I don't understand why we have to worry about all these terms. There are so many terms. I mean, we have to learn all these new terms. And my friend, who's scary, I mean, I think she's scary all the time because she's just like a force of nature, and I would never cross her because she would probably kill me, even though she's like 5 feet tall, put her hand out and she goes, I got to stop you right there. And we're all like, oh no, here it comes. And she says, all of us, motioning to the women of color and herself, spend our entire day navigating around you. We spend all of our energy dealing with you. And we're asking you not to say a couple words, and you're having a problem with that. And I'm wondering if you can examine that.
That I get. That makes total sense. The caveat to that, I think, is that it's not always a race situation. I totally get that. I'm saying, I see that when you're saying what our discussion is here, but then it feels like an age factor gets into it. Someone's in they're a younger age or an older age, and okay, and then then there's a discussion that has to be there. And then I'm Norwegian. I had a guest the other day who said, didn't realize that, and he said all Norwegians are racist. And I had to stop him, and I'm like,
That's
what
not
are you
necessarily
saying?
true.
And he's like, no, they're all racist. He's like, Norwegians are the most racist people on the planet. And I grabbed the Viking hat and I put it on the desk. I'm like, can we chat for a moment? And he wrote me later very nicely. He's like, you know what? I thought about that. And he goes, the reason I said that is I had two roommates when I was younger who were Norwegian. They were both racist. And I came up with the idea that all Norwegians are racist based on these two people. So, suddenly we have all of these different conversations that are out there, not just race, but background, culture. I am very proud of my Viking culture. And I get people say, you're a bunch of how dare you do that? I'm like, because I'm literally related to these people, and they got, it's a different thing.
Yeah.
But so let me segue this a little bit to the book and to the Taking the Space. How does it resonate with different age groups? Are younger, older? What's been the response from generational demos?
Well, I was very smart because I knew what I didn't know. So so I got a bunch of pre-readers, as I said, like a bunch, including young people. And they went through and caught stuff that wasn't cool. There was one thing that was not caught, which I'm still frustrated with. They have that whole girl boss culture, which is like really like in the feminist community, like girl boss culture. And I said boss lady, which is like a term I've been using for years. And it's a little close to girl boss, and nobody caught it. And it's right in the beginning. So I think it might, like, young people might be like, whoa. I actually had a reporter who was young be like, I saw you use boss lady. Is this, like, how can you explain to people this isn't a girl boss book? And I was like, okay, fine. But it's been received really well. The only demographic it has not been received as well by is because we did a bunch of like pre-read book club stuff and things just to get ready for questions, is white women over about 70. They're not necessarily fans all the time.
Is that because of their experiences, or they're just like, look, I made it this far, I'm not going to change now?
That could be it too. They're like, listen, I'm done. I think part of it is the last 1/5 is on intersectionality, and it's really calling out white women to like stop being racist. And I think that it's really rough. I can imagine if I were 70 and I read a book that was like, I'm doing all of the things and have for 50 years, like, and I only have at least 20 left. Do I really want to worry about this?
Do you find that there's a difference there's a difference between somebody who has racist actions versus somebody who is quote unquote racist? Because I think that seems like a lot of the arguments. People are like, well, I'm not a racist. And it's like, well, you might not be a racist, but some of the things you're doing are subliminally racist. You may not.
Yeah. I mean, you breathe in air and you breathe out air. You're going to be racist. I mean, you can't be alive and not be racist. You can't be alive and not be sexist. You can't be alive and not prefer beautiful people. Like these things are just sort of seeped in the culture. But, my mentor's mom actually said this thing, which she said, I don't really care what's in your heart. I don't know if you're racist or not. She's a Black woman. And she said, all I care about is impact. And if I tell you something's hard for me, just listen to what I say, believe me, and change your behavior. And that's sort of how I feel. I think the whole argument over if you're a racist and then you're bad. I mean, I just sort of let that go a long time ago and just realized I'm going to make dumb choices and do dumb things. And I just hope to listen and learn when I do it, but I do think, I do have a term for like the more insidious racism, which is what I call top shelf racism. It's like top shelf sexism, and like goes down so smooth, you don't even know you're drinking it. And then you're like, wow, I'm super sick. And that I think is the harder kind to combat, because the people doing it are not trying to kill you.
Yeah. And there's an aspect of sometimes of victimization in it. People who have been victimized, or they claim that they're victims, and they're like, well, I'm allowed to do this because I suffered through this. Now, I know that you have a past. There have definitely been events in your life where you could play that card quite easily.
Oh, sure.
But it doesn't seem like you have.
No, I don't. For me personally, I don't see a lot of that actually with women of color. I do see it with certain groups now. And I don't know. I may be a generational thing. I mean, I'm Italian, so I read a lot younger than I am. I'm 51. So
Okay.
so I'm older than I look. And so I think my generation was sort of grown up on this. We were brought up, the Gen X was like, you will suffer and deal with it. Like, so that part of me is just like, dude, like, why, just do the thing. And so, one of the things about the post I just did on TikTok is all these neurodivergent people were like, you neuronormative jerk. How could you say such things? And I ended up having to do a TikTok being like, I'm dyslexic, I have ADD, I got hit by a car, I'm super neurodivergent, and guess what? We all have different ways of dealing with it, and let's be tolerant of that. So, I mean, in that case, I could talk about it myself, but I don't know. I don't think victim mode helps anything, but I think it just gets you stuck. But I also think that it doesn't help to label others as acting like victims, because that's a good way to discount what they're saying.
It's not your job to us. I mean, proverbial you, it's not our job to label people. I wouldn't think so. It's not our job. I'm not going to look at you and be like, okay, I'm going to categorize you because that's my job. It's not my job. It's
right.
not, we're all just trying to survive the best we can.
Right. We're just trying to get through the damn day with the apocalypse coming and not being able to get the stuff we want on Amazon because there's a supply shortage and not kill each other.
Well, that's a whole other argument, because then you're like, are you pro Amazon? Are you anti Amazon? It's like, how do they treat their workers? And then we get into a whole other thing.
Oh, I know. That's a whole other thing. I'm like, listen, my book is selling there. I don't know what to tell you. Like, do you want no author ever to get their ideas out? Okay, find me another way and I'll do it. Yeah, and I do it. I try to push out other ways, but Amazon is, a monolithic creature at this point.
What was the response on TikTok when you did the, like you described who you were and you said, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. What was the feedback on that?
It was really interesting because I'm all about dialogue. Like, if someone's like, you're a jerk, I'm like, really, why? Tell me. Let's figure it out. And so when people were saying, you're not caring about neurodivergent people, I was like, here's a link to the thing I just did. I'd love to hear more if you have thoughts. Nobody did. All the most people said things like, you're a terrible person. Just really, some people were like, this is really helpful, but some people said, you're a terrible person. Those people didn't really engage. It really did say something about, I think, how oppression lands and how low the bar is for people forgiving because they're just not used to it. Because as I said, when I did the thing for people of color and I really truly mea culpa, they were, the overwhelming response was thank you. Very forgiving, just totally forgiving, more than I probably deserved. The neurodivergent crowd, I didn't see a single person say, hey, I was on this and now I see this, thanks. Nobody did that. And I sometimes think the more that you suffer, the more that you have empathy, the more that you're able to kind of forgive others when they do dumb things. But I have no idea if that's true. But it wasn't, what was really interesting is there were some people, a couple people that were like, oh, wow, I have had trouble reading my whole life, or I don't understand what neurodivergent is. And I was able to tag other creators and let them learn from it. So that was really cool because I'm really collaborative and I want to, when I don't know something, I don't pretend to know it. I just say, talk to someone who knows,
Yeah. How does that play into, what are your feelings on cancel culture then? Like, I know that's a loaded word now, and it can mean different things to different people. And
right. Well, at first I was kind of a fuddy-duddy about it because I am a nerd and I do happen to love Harry Potter, like just ever so much. And I now realize, you can, my children have educated me. I can love Harry Potter and not like, how awful the author is being right now. But I guess the thing, I don't know the answer. I think it might be too quick on the draw. I think it might be too quick on the draw. But I think that we don't have a lot of power over people who have a lot of power. And so one of the ways we can regain that power is by basically saying, I'm going to hurt you in your pocketbook, but the truth is it doesn't, my daughter was saying it doesn't really work. If you look at the people who've been, quote, canceled, like Rachel Hollis, She's still out there making a lot of money on her book, doing all her talks, even though she was canceled for some very gross, horrible comments that she never really apologized for. So I think it's more like a smack on the wrist for the most part. And sometimes I think maybe it's a way of making people a little bit aware that, you know, you can't just say whatever you want, even if you have a lot of power. But I think there's a balance to be struck. And I don't think we've figured that out yet.
Yeah, it seems odd. It's like if we like their stuff enough, we're okay about looking past a few things. Michael Jackson is an example that comes up a lot. You know, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion at this time that some shit went down, but everybody loves his music so much. It's still on everywhere you go.
Right.
You know, and Harry Potter's a good example too.
Yeah.
You know? But it's you brought up a good point, because it's like, can we separate the art from the person that created it? I mean, Jon Stewart recently got into a brouhaha about the bankers in Harry Potter making a comic observation about how they were based on Jewish stereotypes. And then later he even said, he's like, look, I was kidding with a grain of truth, but he's like, I wasn't trying to cancel her again or anything else.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard, because I think what's happening is there are a lot of groups that have been so silenced for so long, and they're starting to flex their muscles because of social media. And when you start to be able to flex your muscles and you've been just so pissed, you can just be very reactive. And it's hard not to be reactive when people have been crappy to you for a long time. So, you know, I think we all do need to be more careful of how, I mean, I believe that words have power. I really believe that. And I believe that when they land, it's not just sticks and stones, like they hurt. And so you have to be careful when you speak to make sure that you're being a kind person. That said, if someone comes out and says, you know, that was really dumb of me, I shouldn't have done that, I've learned, thank you. I think that is where, as a society, we model that we love it when people learn and grow, and we reward that, or else we're saying, if you make a mistake, you're done forever. And I don't agree with that. I think it's really important for people to be able to say, listen, this was a mistake. I learned from it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Do you think there's an equilibrium somewhere where we get to a point where not just that everybody's treated with the respect that they deserve, but we kind of reach a place where we do understand, we do have the forgiveness, we do have the calling out, but there is a rehab. That's an odd term to use for it, but you know, coming back and, like you said, you know, like, I realized what I did was wrong. I'm trying to find a way to grow from it, be a better person. Do you think we'll reach an equilibrium where we walk hand in hand into a brighter future and you know, without masks?
That caveat says a lot. So I think that you have to be radically optimistic, because I think, I mean, I call myself an oppositional optimist, but you know, I think if you don't believe that, then who cares? Just go make a lot of money, screw over everyone you can, have a lot of sex, and eat good food, and have drugs. Take drugs and get rich. Like, you know what I mean? And some of those things sound really great, but not all of them. You know, sometimes
the weekend's coming.
Yeah, I mean, come on, like, there's some fun stuff in there. But hopefully, you're also caring about the world a little. You know, so I feel like unless you believe that change is possible, then there's no reason to work for it. So I think of it sort of as religion. Like, I don't really believe, I mean, this is me because I'm not particularly religious. I can't imagine, although I guess it's true, that some people are like, you know, there's a dude on a chair who's looking down from a cloud. And like, you know, if you throw the football, then Jesus loves you. I'm like, really? Does Jesus love the person in Abu Ghraib less? Like, you know, it doesn't make any sense to me. But people have faith. They choose to believe it. And some of those people who have faith live better lives because of it, because they really follow the teachings of the Bible in a very pure sense. You know, some of the really more, like the Catholic workers, for example. So I guess I feel like I choose to believe it can be better. And so I will comport myself as such, even if sometimes it doesn't seem like it will be.
There are days. I want to ask you, you bring up your Italian heritage, and I find that really interesting. There's a belief, or there's a history sometimes in the Italian culture that it can be a bit misogynistic. It can be a bit, let's put the mom on the shelf, but let's treat let's slap the ass of the woman, like you said. I mean,
Right.
that is, some of it's stereotype, but I think some of it is based in fact. How did that play into the book and the approach to claiming your space and all of the things that you're working on? How does that play into that?
Well, I mean, I'm not just Italian. So my father is a Sephardic Jew and Dutch. So his mother's
Okay.
Dutch, his father's a Sephardic Jew. So my last name shouldn't even be VanCort. It should be Franco, because they were targeting Jews during the Holocaust with their Spanish surnames, because they'd all fled Spain during the Inquisition. So if you had a
Mhm.
Spanish surname, you were probably going to the camps. So my opal fled before they made it to Holland, and then changed his name in case they made it to the US. And embedded Franco in VanCort. Almost all the letters are the same. So, so I think I actually just did a post about this on TikTok yesterday. My father's grandmother was, the Gestapo raided their house. She was hiding, and she was worried she was going to give away the people who were protecting her. And she took cyanide and died.
Mm.
To save everyone around her, because she didn't think she could withstand torture. And I was brought up with a very strong ethic of that poem that I'm sure we've all heard is, first they came for the, communists, I did not speak out. And then first they came, then they came for the Jews, and they came for the trade unions. Then they came for me, and no one was left to speak out for me. And so I think that guides me more than anything else. We had my father is a social servant. My stepmother is a social servant. My father was a director of planning and development. My stepmother helped people with low incomes get housing. And I was just always brought up with this idea that, like, your job is to try to leave the world just a tiny bit better than you found it. And I think that was sort of the guiding principle of my book. Although there are things I love about Italian culture. I mean, I'm loud as hell, and I swear, and and raunchy. And so, there are things, and we're very feeling people, and, we hug each other and touch each other, and, and I love that. And I think there are different norms, but I think that wasn't the guiding principle of the book.
It's interesting, because I just fell into a trap. I just went, of my own making. I just went with the idea that you had mentioned your Italian heritage, and I latched onto that. And we do that. I just am a pure example of it. I didn't go, well, you have this and this and this and this. I just grabbed that one and said, well, tell me about this. So
Right.
I just learned something about myself. So,
well, I mean, I don't think I said half Italian. I think I might have just said I'm Italian. So that would have been a very reasonable assumption. And I look Italian,
yeah.
so
But we're not all sums of one experience or one background, myself included, you, anyone else. So
Sure.
that just shows that we can't pigeonhole somebody and be like, oh, you're Italian, this is why you did this, and you just
Right.
laid it out, and you're like,
Right.
nope,
Actually,
it's
this
not it
other
at all.
thing.
Yeah, we're shaped. I mean, you and I are almost the same age, so we are product of a half century of experiences and culture and background and people
Yeah,
that we've met and people we've learned from. So
totally.
what's the next step with claiming your space? What's the next step with this world that you're creating and these messages and themes that you're working to get out to people?
Well, I am working to make my space really inclusive on TikTok. I have some ideas on how to do that. I give talks. So I give talks on claiming space with a real bent on communication and the kind of how to unlock communication. We haven't even talked about the fact that I had a head injury in 2014, and I had to rebuild my communication, which is where a lot of the part one came from, in kind of intersecting with my acting training. And I'm also doing a little business venture, which I can't talk about, but stay tuned. But it's going to
Are
be
you
a way
launching
of,
your own tequila brand? Is that what it is?
that would
Admit
be
it.
cool.
You, The Rock.
That'd be awesome. And I've kind of been puttering around with my autobiography, just because all the stuff that happened in my life is so insane that I figure I better write it down while I'm young and still have memory. I'm actually going to put it up on my website soon for people who subscribe, so that they can read an excerpt from it, because it's a pretty cool story, and I think it's worth telling, and I think it's will maybe inspire other people going through a hard time that, there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Do people come to you for advice? Do people come to you with their stories and their problems, and they're like, I just want to talk, or help me, or what do you think of this?
Yes. And I try. I mean, I'm kind of a softie, so I have a really hard time saying no. I'll sometimes say, like, try the book first and then come back to me. But, at this point, with the social media platform I have, it can be a lot, and I already have a lot of mentees. So I guess my only worry with it is, I was a teacher for 20 years. And the one time things went very badly is when people just held me up on a pedestal so high, because there's just nowhere to go but down. And so that's my only worry as my platform grows, is like, I'm a deeply flawed person. I'm going to do deeply flawed person things. And I hope that people will be patient, because, nobody is a perfect human being.
Is there one thing that you see over and over that is a repeated hurdle that women bring to you, or when you talk to them and when you hear their stories? Is there one or two things that, like, you see over and over?
Well, my book was inspired by conversations in the bathroom. I almost called my book Conversations in the Bathroom because my editor was like, I don't know. But it was going to be like Conversations in the Bathroom had to be a badass superhero or something. It just wasn't the best title.
It just reminds me of, like, New York in the 80s. Like, everybody's going to CBGBs and going in the bathroom. That's like, that's the image I come up with.
Exactly. So basically what ended up happening is I would do a talk, and women, I hear them click, there's Q&A, and then I hear this click, 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 and I'm like, oh, here we go. And I go to the bathroom, and I'm washing my hands, and a woman's like, I just want to ask you a question I didn't want to ask in Q&A. And then I ended up having this whole thing in the bathroom that was like often an hour long, and another woman would come in and be like, yeah, I wanted to know about that too. So I really realized, like, it didn't matter where I was. I could be in any country, any state. It was the same questions. There's probably about 50 questions. And I realized, like, we don't feel safe saying these questions out loud, a lot of them. And so I thought, I need to take these conversations out of the darkness and into the sunlight. It sounds corny, but that's what I was sort of thinking. So, but I think the overarching thing that women struggle with the most is, I have all these tools in my book, like, it's really a how-to. It's got a big idea and then how to. But if you don't believe you have the right to claim space, it's useless, And a lot of women are taught from the time we were little girls to be small and to be nice and don't make waves and, be good, be a good girl. And so I think the first step that a lot of women need to learn is, we're 50% of the population. We should be claiming 50% of the space.
So what can men learn from this? Like, when I was born and I was raised, same generation, there were certain things that we were taught that now we look at and we're like, no, you need to fix that. There's other things that are a little more, like opening door for women. There's some women that are like, oh, that's very nice of you. I would open a door for anybody if it happened to be, and then there's other people that I've gotten snapped at and yelled at, and I don't need you to open that door for me. I'm like, I just happen to be in my stride and I opened the door.
You're behind me.
Yeah, it's like it's not like I'm running up and like bowing and throwing my coat over a puddle or something, but there are certain, there's certain things. It's just human decency. Human decency.
So weird. It would be charming. I'd be like, this guy's weird. That's adorable.
I'm gonna try that on my next date. Well, I'll call you back and I'll let you know how it goes. But what can we as men then, not just to come in and be like, how can we help? Because again, that's part of the problem, is we have this whole savior knight on a white steed thing that's ingrained into us. Like, how can I save you? How can I help you? How can I fix this? How can we be involved in that conversation then in a way where we improve and we also help with the space claiming? Where's our place in that? What can we do?
It's a great question. I mean, first of all, and I'm not just trying to sell my book. I get $1 a book. That's what most authors get. So like, I'm not like, go buy. I mean, then, we sell a book because we want the ideas out there. I think that men reading the book have found it really, really useful. and learning the perspective of women. And I've had a lot of men say that it really changed their perspective on a lot of things. So I think that's helpful. I think the other thing is, I'm going back to TikTok because I'm immersed in TikTok these days.
It's addictive.
It's insane. Well, because I'm on it all the time. My team's like, you got to keep going with the TikTok, and I like it, but sometimes I'm losing my mind. So, but there was a man on there saying, men, we have to protect our women. We have to protect women. And then it cut, and a woman was there, and she just looked right at the camera and she said, from who? And I think that was the whole thing, is like, men need to talk to other men, and they need to self-reflect on themselves, just as, and it's never done. And it's not, I think the key is not to fall into the good, bad binary of like, if I ever do a sexist thing or a racist thing or, anti-queer thing, I'm bad, because then you're just never going to live, because you're going to do it anyway. Like for me, I expect I'm going to do stupid things regularly. And my only, my source of pride is that I learn and I do it differently. And I think that's the thing, is like the number one thing men can do is just when someone says, listen, this is the thing, to go, oh, I didn't know that. Thanks for telling me. It's pretty simple, but that's all I want. I'm like, when someone does that, I'm like, you get a cookie, my friend. Like, that's awesome. Because usually they're like, no, let me explain why what I did wasn't what you experienced. I'm like, no, it just landed that way. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Doesn't matter. It's still landed. Can you just not? You know?
Are there safe places? That's an odd word to use because of my age, but still, I mean, are there safe spaces, whether maybe you're in a relationship with a woman and you have the ability to be like, you said something stupid, which husbands do all the time. I know that from my past. Wives too.
Wives all the time.
Just 16 years of marriage, and I'm like, yeah, I had my nights on the couch. But if you're in that relationship, there's a safe space where you can realize you did something, it landed wrong, to use a beautiful term. And then you're in a safe space where it's like, hey, like, I want to figure out how to change. I want to figure out how to fundamentally change the cause for what I did, because I've been self-reflecting. And then you're suddenly in a place where you're with someone who hopefully is like, okay, we're going to sit down. We'll talk about it for a few minutes, but then we're going to have dinner. I don't want to talk about this for a couple hours. If we can create those places where we actually do fix the problem, don't just fix the symptom, fix the disease.
I think that's so important. And I think it's really hard to do when you're the one in the privileged position, and just being open to doing it. And I think that's where the idea of like the other person, saying, I just want you to trust me. I think if you're in a romantic relationship, you want to understand your partner. You want to know why, and as long as it's not like, why, it's like, why? Help me understand. I think that that's important, because you're going to make mistakes. I talked to a therapist once who said there were 3 kinds of relationships, and they had different outcomes. The first kind was really traditional relationships where the gender roles were very rigid. The second was people who were really working on deconstructing those gender roles, really, really working on it. And the third were people who weren't really attending to it at all, but they kind of wanted it to be equal, but they weren't paying any attention and didn't know how to have the conversation. And he said the first kind and the third kind went really well, and the second kind was a disaster. And I think I know why. I used to teach, before the pandemic, I would teach, and I teach in my house. This is actually my green room. This is where my students sign the door when they graduate. And I would go upstairs, and my students would be like, you're amazing. You're amazing. You're the most amazing ever. I love you. You're so amazing. You're a god. Here, let me get you a water, whatever. And then I would go upstairs after I had no time to decompress. And I'd go upstairs and my kids would be like, where the hell's the milk? You're the crappiest parent, actually ever. And I'd be like, wait, you didn't get the God memo? Because it's definitely clear down there.
I'm on a pedestal here. Wait a minute.
I'm flying, man. And so I think that is what having a heterosexual relation, and I'm heterosexual, but that is what a straight relationship is you are trying to, with your partner, one partner is used to deferring and doing all of these certain, like women aren't supposed to get angry, so we can develop passive aggressive behaviors. Men are, have all these other things where they're supposed to be in charge. And then you put those two people in a room and you're like, yeah, you should have a relationship. That's going to go great. And I think the only way to do it is like for the man to realize, like, I get things all the time out there, but in here, I'm going to rewrite the rules completely. And the woman to go, wow, that's going to be really hard for him because he's out all day getting one message. And then he comes home and has to do a completely different thing. How am I going to make sure I don't get pissed when he screws it up? Because it would be unfair to get pissed. And I think that is sort of the two ways of going about it.
That's profound, because I mean, it really is, because as I cannot say how profound that is, because as somebody who goes out into the world and is just trying to figure out the message and what's the proper course and what's the proper terminology and what's your place in the world,
right?
And then to come home and then it's a whole different dynamic. But to have somebody there, it's like, okay, I'm not going to allow you to dwell in victimhood or victimness, but I am going to understand that it ain't easy. Right. I'm here for you. And then suddenly you're a team and whatever.
Empathy for the other person's position is so important.
It is in any relationship. I mean,
absolutely.
even it's, I would even say it's not just romantic relationships. I think just interpersonal relationships, there has to be that empathy. And just because you have empathy, it doesn't mean you're excusing what someone does. If they do something, call them out on it, but still have empathy that they're a fucking human being at some point, and you need to be able to, coexist. And we can't just compartmentalize everybody to a point where, it's like, well, I'm not going to talk to this group anymore. I'm not going to talk to this person anymore. I'm done with them. They're done.
No, I think we all have to just realize that we're all, just try our best and, realize that everyone's going to make mistakes. And that's part of being a human being.
Yeah. So, well, I really didn't know where this conversation was going to go today. And I'm really actually happy with where it did. The reason that I started the show was because I've said this before, is because I felt I was getting stupid. And I mean that in a way where it was like, as a journalist, as a reporter, as an entertainer, and all of that, with COVID, I was getting to this point where it's like, I am not interacting with anybody. I'm getting stagnant. I feel like my brain's getting stupid. So every one of these shows gives me the ability to be like, okay, here's what I'm bringing to the table. You have a set of skills and a background. Let's have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
And this was really interesting to like be able to get into some of those things. So I thank you for that. So where does everybody go to find you and your team? Which I have dealt with your team. Your team is amazing. They are so on it.
I have a good team. So yeah, you can go to ElizaVanCort.com. There's no U in court. And you can go there. You can also find me on the TikTok, where I now have like 80,000 followers. So that's cool. You can, any social media, although I'll be honest, I'm absolutely epically crappy at Twitter and Instagram. I'm bad at it.
Instagram's fun though, because it's nice photos and videos. And people don't yell as much.
I just got on it so late. I'm too old to figure the damn thing out.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. Hold on. You're too old for Instagram, but you're flourishing on TikTok.
Well, TikTok's my medium, man. It's visual. I can do editing. It's like, sure, but yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, joining my way, I'm trying to get more and more giving like special content on my website. And I do really love hearing from people who've gone to listened to me on a podcast, bought the book, and asked questions, because that's kind of why I'm doing this. So if anyone does, buy the book and has a question, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or my personal Facebook page, because my professional one is pretty much a graveyard and I can't get into it and we can't figure out what's going on.
Well, all the links will be in the show notes to your book, to social media, to your website. So everybody check out the show notes. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. It really was, and I'm mean this from the bottom of my heart. I really needed this conversation today, and I'm not a believer in fate. I'm kind of not a religious person, kind of like you a little bit, but it was interesting that you popped up at this time in my life and we had this conversation. So I'll chalk that up to whatever it is. So thank you for that.
Thank you. It was a great conversation.
Support comes from the History's Train Wrecks podcast that focuses on stories like a temper tantrum that changed history, the president who promised not to run again and regretted it for the rest of his life, the World War II general who lost his pants on a secret mission in enemy territory. The History's Train Wrecks podcast, available now.
Hey everybody, hope you enjoyed the show. Help us spread the word by subscribing and leaving a review. If you want to support us even more, you can find a link to our Patreon account in the show notes. And if you're one of our diehard fans, head on over to thevikingdogstore.com where you can find official Open Highway merchandise to show your support to the entire world. But most of all, thanks for listening.
For the highways of America, which for so many years were an assortment of as many designs and pavements as there were states, are now becoming one big road that can take you anywhere faster, safer, and more directly than ever before. What is this big road? Where is it going? How much has been built? How much is yet to come? These are questions we ask. Certainly traveling the entire system would be a memorable experience, but few of us have the time for such a trip.
Copyright Viking Dog 2022. All rights reserved. The Open Highway is a trademark of Viking Dog LLC.